It was a cold November evening when I first saw her, sitting by the corner bench near the old bakery wrapped in a torn blanket, her face hidden behind tangled strands of hair that looked like they hadn't been brushed in years. I was on my way home from church, holding my grocery bag with trembling hands as the wind cut through my coat. Something about her made me stop. Maybe it was the faint sound of her humming an old lullaby that stirred something deep in my chest. I couldn't place it at first, but it felt hauntingly familiar. For a few moments, I stood still, watching her. People passed by without a glance. Cars splashed puddles near her feet, and she didn't even flinch. My heart twisted painfully. At 71, I had seen much of the world: war, love, betrayal, but there was something about that woman that pulled at me stronger than anything else had in years. I hesitated, telling myself not to get involved, but I couldn't walk away. Not when I could almost feel her sadness seeping into the air. So I approached slowly. "Miss, do you need help?" I asked softly, careful not to startle her. She lifted her head just a little. The streetlight flickered over her face, and my breath caught. Beneath the dirt and the bruises, there was something about her eyes, gray with flecks of green, that tugged at a memory I thought I'd buried long ago. "I'm fine," she murmured, her voice hoarse, almost broken. "You're not," I said gently. "You'll freeze out here." For a second she looked at me as if she didn't understand English. Then, slowly, she shook her head. "Nowhere else to go." Those words pierced me. I couldn't just leave her there, so I did something completely unlike me. I offered my hand and said, "Come with me. I have a warm meal and a spare room, just for the night." Her eyes darted toward mine, suspicious yet desperate. Finally, she nodded. The walk to my house was silent. She followed a few steps behind me, limping slightly. Every few minutes, she looked over her shoulder as if expecting someone to appear out of the dark. I didn't press her with questions. I simply led her home to the little cottage I'd lived in alone since my husband, George, passed away 10 years ago. When I opened the door, warmth and the faint smell of lavender filled the air. She stepped inside hesitantly, her eyes scanning the photos on the walls. My heart beat faster as her gaze lingered on the old family portrait from 1968. My parents, my brother Henry, and her, my sister, Clara, the sister who vanished 50 years ago without a trace. I swallowed hard, forcing the thought away. That couldn't be her. Clara would have been gone, or at least unrecognizable by now. And yet... "Sit down," I said, trying to steady my voice. "Let me make you something warm." She sat at the edge of the chair, as if afraid to touch anything. Her fingers were thin, trembling as she tried to remove her gloves. The sight made my eyes sting. I poured her some hot soup and placed it in front of her. She lifted the spoon and took small, careful sips, closing her eyes as though she hadn't eaten in days. When she looked up at me, a faint smile ghosted across her cracked lips. "Thank you," she whispered. That night, after she finished eating, I showed her the guest room. The bed was small but soft, with clean sheets and a quilt I'd made years ago. She stood there for a long moment, touching the fabric as if it reminded her of something. "You can stay as long as you need," I told her. Her head turned sharply. "Why are you being so kind to me?" I didn't know what to say, because once I wished someone had done the same for my sister. The room fell silent. For a moment, I thought I saw something flicker in her eyes, fear, recognition, but she turned away quickly and muttered, "Good night." That night, I couldn't sleep. The sound of her quiet movements down the hall, the faint creak of the floorboards, it all kept me awake. My mind wandered to that terrible year, 1972, when Clara had run away after a fight with our parents. She'd been only 22 then, wild, stubborn, and full of dreams. We searched for months. The police found nothing. My parents died never knowing what happened to her. The next morning, when I went to check on her, the room was empty, but the bed was made. Panic gripped me until I found her in the kitchen, washing dishes. She looked calmer. "Morning," she said, her voice steadier. "Morning," I replied, studying her face closely. The more I looked, the more I couldn't deny the resemblance. The shape of her nose, the curve of her jaw, it was too similar. I felt my throat tighten. "What's your name?" I finally asked. She hesitated. "Lara," she said after a pause. "Lara." The name sent chills down my spine. My sister used to hate her full name, Clara, and always joked she'd drop the C one day to sound more modern. I forced a smile. "That's a lovely name." Days turned into a week. Lara stayed quietly, helping around the house, avoiding personal questions, but small things began to unsettle me. She seemed to know her way around my home too quickly. Once, I caught her standing by the piano, touching the keys like she'd played it before. Another time, she looked at my wedding photo and whispered, "George aged well." I froze. "How do you know my husband's name?" She blinked, startled, then stammered, "You mentioned him earlier," but I knew I hadn't. Each day my unease grew stronger, mixed with a strange, aching hope. I found myself watching her closely, how she brushed her hair, how she hummed while folding laundry, even how she sipped her tea. Everything reminded me of Clara. And then one evening, as I was dusting the bookshelf, she came into the living room holding a small wooden box. My heart skipped. It was my mother's jewelry box, locked for decades. "Where did you find that?" I asked sharply. "In the hall closet," she said. "I thought it might need cleaning." My pulse quickened. Only Clara and I ever knew where that box was kept. She noticed my trembling hands. "Are you all right?" I stared at her, my voice breaking. "Who are you really?" She froze. The color drained from her face. Then, in a whisper so fragile I could barely hear it, she said, "You already know." The room spun. My knees weakened as the world blurred around me. That voice, the same soft tone that used to sing lullabies with me when we were children. My heart pounded in disbelief. It couldn't be. But it was. Clara was standing right in front of me. She didn't cry. Neither did I. We just stood there in my living room. Two women with decades between us, and a silence that felt older than either of us. I could hear the clock ticking on the mantel, each second heavier than the last. When she finally spoke, it was not an apology, not a scream, not the kind of reunion speech I'd imagined in 100 lonely nights. It was a simple, Broken confession. I didn't mean to stay gone this long. My knees gave way, and I sank into the armchair by the window. The late afternoon light had turned to a thin gray ribbon. "Clara," I said, tasting the name like bread after a long fast. "If you're really Clara, then tell me our father's middle name." She didn't hesitate. "Emmett." And the neighbors who always fought about the dog. "Mr. and Mrs. Cormack." And the dog was named Button because he always chewed off every button he found. She managed a faint smile that died as quickly as it tried to live. "I used to feed him leftover biscuits through the fence." I closed my eyes. The room blurred, but not from tears. My body didn't have the energy for tears. "Where have you been all these years?" She swallowed, then looked toward the kitchen as if the answer was stored there among the stacked plates and jars of sugar. "It's not a straight line," she said. "It's not even a story you'll want to hear. I've waited half a century to hear any story," I said. "Give me the ugly truth." She set the wooden box on the coffee table, careful, reverent. "I left because I thought I was saving us. I thought if I got away from the house, from the shouting, from the plans everybody else had made for me, I'd finally be able to breathe. I had a man then, Jonathan." She said the name like it might burn her tongue. "He promised a new life out west. Work. A little cottage with blue shutters. He had a way of talking that made every promise sound like a fact. And the word scratched at my throat. And the cottage never existed. The job never existed. He took my money. He took my papers. He took me to a town I didn't know and left me with people who smiled too hard." She stared at the box lid but wasn't really looking at it. "They said I owed for the roof and the bed and the food. Then I owed for the men. I felt my fingers curl into my skirt. The air changed. It tasted like iron. Oh, Clara, it took me years to get out. Then there was another man who said he could help, and he did for a while. I learned to keep moving, never stay long enough to be counted, never hold a name longer than a season. I told myself I'd send word to you. But I kept imagining our parents' faces, and shame built a wall I couldn't climb." She drew a breath that cut like a blade. "And then I heard about the funeral. Mama went first. Then Papa. I tried to come back once. The house was already yours by then. You were laughing with a man in the yard. I thought you didn't need me anymore. George," I whispered. "I remembered a summer day, a pitcher of lemonade, the sweetness of ignorance." She nodded. "I watched you hang laundry. You had a life. I didn't know how to stand in your light without swallowing it." The clock ticked again, a metronome of grief. Why now? Why the bench? Why that song? She closed her eyes. I hummed it to remember I once belonged somewhere. We sat with that. I poured tea I did not taste. The steam rose between us like a veil, and when it faded, we were still there. Two old women, the last of a small and tattered family, clutching the edges of a conversation that could undo us both. "Do you forgive me?" she asked, so quietly I almost missed it. "I don't know," I said. It was the most honest answer I had. "Forgiveness isn't a door I can open and hold for you. It's a path through thorn bushes. I might walk it. I might bleed on the way." Her shoulders loosened, as if even that kind of truth gave her a place to sit. "Then I'll wait at the gate and bring you bandages." For the first time, my mouth tried on a smile. It hurt. It felt right. We stayed up late, trading small details as if they were currency. The taste of the apricot jam Mama used to make, the exact way Papa folded his Sunday paper, the town's old 4th of July parade where we wore red ribbons in our hair. In the telling, Clara's voice changed pitch, as if each memory sanded the rust off a bell. But there were places in her story where she went quiet, long gaps, names she didn't say. I wanted to ask, to pry, to drag the rest of her years into the light, but I also knew that rescue done too fast can feel like drowning. Before bed, she touched the jewelry box again. "May I?" I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. I found the key in the kitchen drawer where it had slept half my lifetime. The lid creaked open to the scent of cedar and old perfume. Inside lay Mama's brooch, the one shaped like a swallow, the string of freshwater pearls Papa bought in a fit of romance, 2 mismatched earrings, and at the bottom, tucked like a secret, a folded slip of paper. I didn't remember that. My hands shook as I unfolded it. It was a letter dated March 1972, the week before Clara disappeared. The ink had bled at the edges, but the words still stood. "If you find this, it means I can't carry what I know any longer. Your father is not who you think he is. The debts are not all from the store. There is something hidden in the house, and if anyone comes asking, say nothing. Keep your sister safe. Forgive me. Mama." I looked up. Clara's face had gone pale. "You never saw this?" I shook my head. "I didn't even know it was there." She sat back, palms pressed to her knees. "He said no one would believe me. He said I was making things up. Who?" The word snapped like a twig. Her eyes slid to the window, to the thin reflection of us in the glass. Jonathan, and others. But before him there was Mr. Dalloway. The name landed like a dead bird on the coffee table. Mr. Dalloway had been Papa's friend, a visitor with a fox smile and a car that smelled like new leather. He used to bring us candy in paper sacks and pat our heads like we were little horses he might buy some day. What did he do? Clara's hands found each other, ringing softly. He came before I left. He came with a ledger. I heard them arguing in the cellar, Papa and Mr. Dalloway. There was talk of shipments that weren't on invoices. Papa said he wouldn't do it any more. Mr. Dalloway said he'd tell the town what Papa owed and to whom. I went down the back steps to listen, and he saw me. He smiled and told me pretty girls shouldn't wander into storms. 2 days later, Jonathan arrived with his sweet tongue and his blue-shuttered lies. My skin crawled. The cellar had always been a place of dust and jars and the old coal bin, not conspiracy. Are you saying Papa was what? Running something through the store? I don't know, she said. I only know fear when I taste it. And I know someone wanted me gone long before I packed a bag. Night deepened. The house made its small settling sounds. I felt both older and newly born, like I'd been dropped into a life and told to name it. The letter lay on the table between us like a map with half its roads torn off. "Tomorrow," I said, "we'll go down to the cellar." She flinched. You still have it? Of course I do, I said. I still have everything. But I lied a little. I haven't had everything for a long time. We slept. Or rather, we lay in separate rooms trying to make peace with the shadows. I woke to the sound of a drawer closing softly. Old habits told me not to fret. New fears pulled me from bed. The hallway was dim, a strip of moonlight cutting across the rug like a ribbon. I found Clara in the kitchen, standing very still. The back door was unlocked. She held the letter in one hand, the swallow brooch in the other. You were leaving, I said, but it came out as a question. She closed her eyes but didn't hide the truth. I didn't want to wake you. I thought if I took only what was mine, if I made myself lighter, the past wouldn't keep breaking over your shore. Clara. I said her name the way Mama used to when things were about to tip from silly to serious. If you leave now, you'll drown twice. She put the brooch down very carefully, like setting a bird back in its nest. I don't know how to stay. Even standing still feels like stealing. Then steal one more thing, I said. Steal morning with me. Steal coffee and the cellar and a shared pair of gloves. Her mouth trembled. She nodded. We drank coffee that tasted like resolve. When daylight came thin and winter pale, we went to the cellar door. I hadn't opened it in months. The key turned with a small groan, and a smell rose that was all stone and memory. The steps were narrow, so I went first, one hand on the rail, the other tight around a flashlight that once belonged to George. The beam cut through dust, jars glinted on shelves, tools hung on hooks like quiet witnesses. At the far wall, the old coal bin sat where it always had. My light paused on something that hadn't always been there. A square of wood, lighter than the rest, patched into the paneling near the floor. Newer nails, careful hands. Did you? I started. No, she said, voice a thread. I've never been back until now. The nails looked hand-driven, not factory straight. Someone had been in my house after I stopped visiting this room, after arthritis turned stairs into slow rivers. I set the flashlight between my teeth and pried at the edge with a flathead from the tool peg. The wood lifted with a reluctant sigh. Behind it, darkness. Then the smell of old paper, old leather, and something else chemical. Bitter. Careful, Clara whispered. I reached inside and felt cloth oilcloth, wrapped tight. It slid out with a muffled drag. My hands shook as I unrolled it on the cellar floor. Inside lay a ledger with a cracked brown cover, a small revolver wrapped in oiled rags, and a stack of envelopes bound with twine. The top envelope was addressed in Mama's hand, not to me, not to Papa, but to a name I hadn't seen since high school, Mr. Dalloway. My mouth went dry. I picked up the ledger, pages and pages of neat columns, many lined in red, dates from the late 60s into early 72, codes under inventory, candles, nails, flower words that looked ordinary until you looked at the margins where a second hand had made small annotations. Not flower, F, not nails, N, and then a mark I recognized from town gossip but never believed I'd see in my own house. A carefully drawn compass rose in the corner of certain pages. Shipments, quiet ones. Clara knelt beside me, her breath warm on my wrist. "We were the route," she said, her voice breaking. "The store was the cover." I turned to the envelopes. The second one had my name. I didn't open it. Not yet. I stood there, gripping the ledger, feeling like every truth I'd ever trusted had cracked open. The pages trembled in my hands, not from the chill of the cellar, but from the tremor crawling up my spine. The ink, the handwriting, the strange symbols, each mark whispered that my childhood home had never been as innocent as I believed. Clara knelt beside me, her fingers brushing the edges of the envelope with my name on it. "Open it," she whispered. Her voice carried that same urgency she used to have when we were children sneaking cookies before dinner. But this time, it wasn't mischief, it was fear. My heart thudded against my ribs. I tore the envelope open, expecting a confession, maybe a plea. Instead, I found only one page folded twice, yellowed with age. "Evelyn, if you ever read this, it means the man I trusted has turned against us. Keep Clara away from him. He knows too much. I'm sorry for the silence that's coming." No signature, no date. But the handwriting, it was my father's. I stared at the letter as if the words could rearrange themselves into something softer. "He was protecting you," I said, my voice cracking. "Or trying to silence me," Clara said quietly. Her face was pale, her eyes glinting with an anger that had been buried for decades. "He didn't want me to tell anyone what I heard. You were 22, Clara. He was your father." "Was he?" she asked bitterly. "Mama's letter said he wasn't who we thought." That sentence hung in the air like a storm cloud. My breath caught. For years, I'd believed our family's tragedy ended when she disappeared. But this was a different wound entirely, one I hadn't even known existed. The cellar felt smaller. The walls seemed to press closer, listening. Clara stood and began pacing, her hands trembling. "He used us. Evie, the store, the home, everything. It was part of a network. I overheard them talking about shipments, codes, and payments hidden in church donations. I looked down at the ledger again, tracing the red lines, the initials scrawled beside each date. And Mama knew." "She always knew," Clara said. "But she stayed because she thought she could protect us. When I found out, I wanted to tell the police, but Papa begged me not to. He said these weren't men you could cross and live to talk about it. He said one mistake could get us both killed. The night I left, he didn't even try to stop me." Her voice faltered, and I saw her eyes glisten in the dim light. "Evie, he let me go." Like I was already gone. My heart ached with a mixture of pity and disbelief. I wanted to defend him, the man who used to tuck us into bed, the man who fixed my dollhouse roof when it broke. But as I looked at the gun wrapped in the oiled rag beside the ledger, I couldn't find the words. "What do we do with this?" I whispered. Clara crouched down again, staring at the ledger. "We finish it. We find out what they were hiding. Maybe it's the only way I'll ever be free of it." I nodded weakly. "Tomorrow we'll go to the old church archives. Maybe someone there remembers something. But that night, sleep didn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mama's neat handwriting, Papa's trembling words, Clara's haunted face. The house creaked with old ghosts. Around 3 in the morning, I thought I heard footsteps near the back door. When I checked, no one was there, but the lock was turned halfway open. By morning, I found Clara sitting at the kitchen table, already dressed, her coat buttoned to her throat. She was staring at the ledger. "I couldn't sleep either," she said softly. "Evie, do you remember Mr. Dalloway's son, Peter?" "Yes," I said slowly. "He was a few years older than us. He went off to the city, didn't he?" "He didn't. He stayed. I saw him last year. He didn't recognize me, of course, but I recognized him. He's still here, still running his father's charity shipments." I set my teacup down carefully. "Clara, you're saying this thing, whatever it was, it's still going on?" She nodded. "And if he finds out we have that ledger—" A knock thundered at the door. We both froze. No one ever visited me this early. I moved toward the window, careful not to let the curtain move too much. A man stood on the porch, broad-shouldered, in a dark coat, his face shadowed by the morning light. He wasn't a postman. He wasn't from the church. "Don't answer," Clara hissed. But the knocking came again, harder this time. "Mrs. Turner?" A deep voice called out. My heart dropped. He knew my name. "I just need a moment of your time." I shook my head at Clara. "Maybe he's from the council," I whispered. "About the property line." Clara's grip tightened on my wrist. "No, Evie. Don't." The silence stretched. Then came the sound of retreating footsteps, gravel crunching, a car door shutting, an engine starting. We both exhaled at once. Clara walked to the window and peered through the crack. "Black sedan," she murmured. "No plates on the front." I felt the blood drain from my face. "He knew my name," I whispered. Clara turned toward me, her eyes wide, filled with that same terror I'd seen in her when we were children and lightning struck too close. "Evie, they know I'm here." The rest of the day passed in a haze. We didn't go to the church. We didn't leave the house. Clara kept pacing, glancing out every window, every shadow. I tried to keep calm, but inside I was unraveling. That night, as I sat by the fireplace, I heard her speaking softly in the other room. I thought she was praying. Then I realized she was on the phone. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I found it, the ledger. I'll bring it tomorrow. Just let us be." I froze. The blood in my veins turned to ice. I stepped into the doorway. "Who are you talking to?" She jumped, dropping the receiver. "Evie, You lied," I said, my chest tightening. "You said you wanted to end this. Who were you calling?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I was trying to protect you. You don't understand." "Then make me understand," I shouted, louder than I had in years. Her hands shook as she reached for me. "They'll kill you if they think you're involved." I thought I could give them the ledger and... "You brought danger into my home," I said, stepping back. "After all these years, Clara, you're still running." She covered her face and began to cry deep, broken sobs that tore through the silence. I stood there, shaking, my heart at war with itself. When I finally went to bed, I locked my door for the first time in my own house. But as I lay there, staring at the ceiling, guilt gnawed at me. What if she was trying to protect me? What if this was her final attempt to make things right? I didn't sleep until dawn, and when I woke up, the house was silent. Too silent. Her room was empty. The ledger was gone. And on the table beneath the old jewelry box was a single note in my sister's handwriting. "I'll finish what I started. Don't come looking for me." I stared at the note for what felt like hours. The morning light crept across the kitchen table, touching the edge of the paper, the old jewelry box, the empty coffee mug beside it, all silent witnesses to the chaos that had entered my quiet life. Clara was gone again, swallowed by the same world that had taken her half a century ago. Only this time she'd left a trail of danger behind her. I picked up the note and read it again, my fingers trembling. "Don't come looking for me." As if I could obey that. She was my sister, my only family left, the one I thought I'd lost forever. I couldn't let her vanish into the dark again. Not now, not when I'd just gotten her back. I grabbed my coat, shoved the note into my pocket, and stepped outside. The air was sharp, the sky heavy with the promise of snow. My breath came out in white clouds as I scanned the empty street. Her footprints were faint, leading toward the main road. I followed them as far as I could, each step a whisper of fear. At the bus stop, an old man in a wool cap was reading the morning paper. "Excuse me," I said softly. "Did you see a woman pass by earlier? About my age, short gray hair, wearing a long brown coat?" He lowered the paper and squinted at me. "You mean the one who looked lost?" She caught the 6:15 bus toward the city. The city! My heart sank. That's where the Dalloways lived. I went back home, my mind racing. I needed help, but who could I trust? I didn't want the police involved yet. Clara was fragile. If she was trying to fix something, I couldn't risk her getting caught in a web of accusations. So I did the only thing I could. I went back to the cellar. The panel we'd pried open still lay on the floor. I knelt down, flashlight in hand, hoping maybe she'd left something else behind. A clue. A sign. And there, beneath the loose stone where the ledger had been, I found a torn scrap of paper. On it was scrawled a single word: Harbor Light. I froze. Harbor Light wasn't just a word, it was the name of an old warehouse near the docks, abandoned years ago after a fire. I remembered seeing it in the newspaper once, tied to a smuggling case that was quickly hushed up. My gut twisted. That had to be where she was going. By noon, I was on the bus to the city, clutching my purse like it held my heartbeat. The streets blurred past the window shops, factories, children in uniforms, everything ordinary, while my world spun toward something extraordinary and dangerous. The city felt colder than home. The harbor district was nearly deserted, save for a few fishermen and stray cats darting between crates. The warehouse stood at the end of the pier, its roof half collapsed, windows shattered like broken teeth. I hesitated only a moment before stepping inside. The smell hit me first: salt, rust, and something faintly chemical. Water dripped from the ceiling, echoing through the cavernous space. I called out, "Clara?" My voice came back to me, hollow and distant. Then I heard it a shuffle, a muffled sound from the far end of the hall. I moved closer, my cane tapping against the concrete. "Clara, it's me. Please, come out." A figure stepped from the shadows, not Clara, but a man. Broad shoulders, long coat, black gloves. His face was familiar in a way that chilled me. "Mrs. Turner," he said, his voice low. "You shouldn't be here." My pulse quickened. "You were at my house." He smiled faintly. "I was hoping we could speak under calmer circumstances." "Where is she?" I demanded. "She came to me," he said, "voluntarily. She had something that didn't belong to her." "The ledger?" He nodded. "And she promised to return it. But then she got nervous." I tried to keep my voice steady. "What do you want from her?" He stepped closer, his boots crunching on broken glass. "Closure." "The same thing you want, I imagine." I could see now that he was younger than I first thought, 40s. Maybe, but his eyes were cold, calculating. "You're Peter Dalloway," I said. He smiled again. "Ah, so she told you about me. You're running your father's operation. Call it tradition," he said with a shrug. "We handle what the city forgets, goods that need quiet transportation, information that needs discretion. Your father understood that." "My father was a shopkeeper," I said sharply. "Your father," Peter replied, "was our accountant." My knees went weak. "You're lying." He tilted his head. "Am I? Why else do you think your sister was kept quiet all these years?" I wanted to shout, to deny it, but deep down, part of me knew. The ledger, the hidden gun, the letter, it all fit too perfectly. "Where is she?" I asked again, my voice barely more than a whisper. "She's safe," he said. "For now." "But she's in over her head." "You both are. I suggest you forget about the past and go home. Let the dead stay buried." Then from behind him I heard it, a faint voice. "Evie?" My heart lurched. Clara was there, her wrists bound with a rope, her face pale but defiant. "Let her go," I shouted. Peter sighed. "I wish I could, but she's a liability. She's been feeding information to people who think they can expose us. I can't have that." Something inside me snapped. I stepped forward, trembling but determined. "If you hurt her, you'll answer for it." He looked at me with something almost like pity. "Mrs. Turner, you're not the enemy. Go home before this gets ugly." But I didn't move. I reached into my coat pocket, and my fingers brushed against something cold and hard, the revolver from the cellar. I hadn't even realized I'd brought it with me. Peter's eyes flicked to my hand. "Don't," he warned. "I've spent 70 years losing the people I love," I said, my voice shaking. "I won't lose her again." For a long moment the only sound was the dripping water and our uneven breaths. Then, slowly, he raised his hands. "All right," he said quietly. "Take her. But remember this, your father's debt isn't paid." He stepped aside. I rushed to Clara, my hands fumbling with the ropes. Her skin was icy, her breath shallow. "Evie," she whispered, You shouldn't have come. Neither should you, I said, helping her to her feet. We made it halfway to the door when Peter's voice echoed behind us. Mrs. Turner? I turned. He was smiling faintly again. Tell your sister the past always collects. We didn't stop running until we reached the street. Clara clung to me, shaking. He's right, she said. They'll never let us go. Then we'll face them together, I said fiercely. This time, I won't let you vanish. As we stumbled toward the main road, I saw the first snowflakes falling, soft and silent, covering the city in white. But beneath that peace, I felt the weight of something far from over. Because somewhere behind us, in that crumbling warehouse, the echoes of our father's sins had started to stir again. We didn't speak on the ride back. The bus rattled along the frozen road, its heater barely working, and the city slowly disappeared behind a gray curtain of snow. Clara sat beside me, her hands wrapped around a paper cup of tea that had long gone cold. Her face looked drawn, hollowed out by exhaustion and memory. Every so often, she'd glance out the window as if expecting that black sedan to appear behind us again. When we finally reached the stop near my home, dusk was already pressing down. The streets were empty. Even the bakery had closed early. We walked the rest of the way in silence. Only when we were inside, with the door locked and the curtains drawn, did I finally let out the breath I'd been holding since morning. She sank into the chair by the fireplace, shivering despite the heat. I poured her a cup of chamomile tea and sat across from her. You have to tell me everything now, Clara, I said. No more half-truths. I deserve to know. Her eyes flickered toward the fire. There isn't much left to tell that won't break you, Evie. Then let it break me, I said softly. It already has. She nodded slowly, her fingers trembling as she set down the cup. Peter wasn't lying. Papa kept books for them, shipments of things that were never supposed to exist. Stolen medicine, smuggled weapons, fake papers for men who didn't want their names known. He said he was doing it to pay off a debt. But later, I found out it wasn't about money. It was about loyalty. He owed those men something far darker than cash. I swallowed. And Mama? She knew, Clara said, but she thought if she pretended not to, she could keep us safe. When she wrote that letter, she was trying to protect us from what Papa had done. That's why she warned you to say nothing. The night I heard their fight in the cellar, she told me to run if anything happened to her. I thought she meant run from the house, but she meant from him. I sat back, the firelight flickering across her face. You think, Papa? She nodded before I could finish. Yes, he wasn't the man we thought. When I told him I was leaving, he didn't stop me because he was afraid I'd talk. Jonathan wasn't a stranger. He didn't know Papa sent him. He was supposed to take me away quietly, make sure I didn't return. My stomach turned. Dear God, I only found out years later, she continued, voice trembling. Jonathan told me before he died. Said he was paid to deliver me to men who wanted to silence me, but he fell in love with me instead. That's why he kept me hidden. When he died, I stayed running, always running from people who wanted the ledger. Her words sat heavy in the air. I could feel my pulse in my temples. Then why come back now? Because they're dying, Evie, she said. The old names, the old debts. Peter wanted to clean the slate. The ledger was proof of everything, the smuggling, the payments, the people they bribed. I thought if I gave it to him, he'd stop looking for me. But he only wanted to destroy it. I leaned forward. And you didn't let him? I hid the real ledger, she whispered. The one in the cellar was a copy. I left it there because I wanted you to find it. I froze. You wanted me to find it? Yes. I needed someone to know the truth if I didn't make it back. She met my gaze, tears pooling in her eyes. You deserve to know who our father really was. I sat there, numb. My hands were cold even near the fire. I didn't know whether to feel gratitude or betrayal. So where is it now? In a place no one would think to look, she said faintly. But Peter will come for it. He'll come for me. And when he can't find me, he'll come for you. I stood up and began pacing. The floor creaked beneath my feet. We can't stay here then. We need to go to the police. She shook her head. No, they're part of it. They've always been part of it. You remember Officer Murray? I did. He'd been a family friend, came by often after Papa's death, always asking gentle questions. He was one of them, Clara said. He kept the case closed after I vanished, made sure no one looked too hard. The room felt smaller, the walls pressing in. I didn't know who to trust anymore. A gust of wind rattled the windows. Somewhere outside, a car engine hummed and then went silent. I crossed to the window and pulled the curtain aside just enough to peek out. A black sedan sat under the streetlight. My breath caught. He's here, I whispered. Clara's eyes widened. He found us. The knock came moments later, soft, deliberate, terrifying. I turned off the lamp, plunging the room into the dim glow of the fire. Upstairs, I whispered. Go now. She hesitated, but I pushed her toward the stairs. Go. When she disappeared into the dark hallway above, I took the revolver from the drawer where I'd hidden it and moved toward the door. My hand trembled as I unlocked it an inch. Mrs. Turner. A calm voice said through the gap, Please, I just want to talk. I opened it slightly wider. Peter stood there, snow on his shoulders, his face expressionless. Talking time is over, I said coldly. He sighed. I don't want to hurt anyone. I just need what she took. She didn't take anything that belongs to you, I said. He gave a small, tired smile. Everything in that book belongs to me now. Then you'll have to take it from me, I said, stepping back enough for him to see the revolver in my hand. His eyes hardened. You're brave, Mrs. Turner, foolish but brave. We stood there in silence, the storm howling behind him, the fire crackling behind me. For a moment I thought he might lunge, but then his expression softened. She's upstairs, isn't she? I didn't answer. I'll give you one night, he said finally. One night to convince her to hand it over. If she doesn't, I'll come back, and I won't knock next time. Then he turned and walked into the snow, his footsteps fading into the storm. I shut the door, locked it, and collapsed against it, shaking. When I turned, Clara was standing halfway down the stairs, pale and trembling. You heard him, I said. He's giving us until morning. She nodded slowly. Then we run at dawn. No, I said firmly. We finish this, Evie. If he wants that ledger so badly, I said, then whatever's in it can destroy him. And I'm tired of living in fear. For the first time, I saw the old spark in her eyes, the same fierce light that had once made her unstoppable. Then we end it together, she whispered. And as the snow thickened outside, I knew there would be no sleep tonight, only the truth waiting to rise with the morning. The storm raged outside all night, slapping the windows and wailing through the chimney as if the house itself were mourning. Clara and I sat by the fire, the flames burning low, our faces pale in the orange light. The old revolver lay on the table between us, silent, cold, and heavy with decisions neither of us wanted to make. "Do you really think we can end this?" she asked quietly. "It's been going on since before we were born." I stared into the fire. Every rot stops when someone cuts deep enough. Maybe that someone has to be us. She gave a tired, sad smile. "You sound like Mama." At that, I almost broke. "I wish she were here," I whispered. "I wish she'd told us everything before it came to this." Clara reached across the table and squeezed my hand. She did the best she could. For a long while, we sat there in silence, listening to the storm. The minutes dragged into hours, and when the first gray light of dawn began to push through the curtains, I felt something shift inside me, not fear anymore, but resolve. "We're not running," I said finally. "Not this time." Clara nodded, her eyes dark and determined. "Then we use the truth." I went to my writing desk, pulled open the drawer, and took out the envelope she'd given me years ago, the one that had once held Mama's letter. Now, I slipped the real ledger inside. "If anything happens to us," I said, "this goes to the press. Every name, every number. I'll send it myself." She looked startled. "You still have contacts?" "I used to volunteer at the local paper," I said. "I still know who answers the phone there at dawn." For the first time since she came back, Clara's lips curved into a small, proud smile. "You always did think 2 steps ahead." The phone rang just as I finished sealing the envelope. The sharp sound cut through the quiet like a blade. Clara and I exchanged a glance. I picked up the receiver slowly. "Hello?" A familiar voice answered low, calm, and far too polite. "Good morning, Mrs. Turner." My stomach twisted. "Mr. Dalloway." "You had your night," he said. "Now it's time to decide." "I already have," I said. "You'll get nothing." There was a pause. Then softly he said, "Then I suppose we'll have to come take it." The line went dead. I slammed the receiver down, my heart pounding. "They're coming." Clara was already moving, pulling open drawers, checking the locks. "How many?" "I don't know. Enough." She turned to me, her expression steady now, fierce. "Then we give them what they came for, just not how they expect." By the time the first knock came, the fire had burned low, the house was dark, and the ledger was gone hidden where no one would think to look. I'd mailed the envelope to the editor hours ago, slipping it into the early post drop just before sunrise. The knock was followed by the door handle turning. They weren't even pretending courtesy this time. I could hear at least 2 sets of footsteps on the porch. Clara whispered, "Evie, if something happens to me." "Don't," I said sharply. "Nothing's happening to either of us." The door swung open. 2 men stepped inside, coats dripping with snow. Peter was behind them, his face pale with fury. "I warned you," he said softly. "And I listened," I replied. "That's why I acted first." He frowned. "Where's the ledger?" "Gone," I said. "Gone where?" "Farther than you can reach." For the first time, I saw real panic flicker in his eyes. "You don't understand what you've done." "Oh, I do," I said. "You've spent decades hiding behind other people's silence. Well, not anymore. The world will know what you and your father did, what mine helped you do." He took a step closer, his jaw tightening. "You think anyone will believe an old woman and a ghost?" "They won't need to believe," I said. "They'll have proof." The words hung in the air. Then, for a split second, I saw the shift in his posture, the sudden reach inside his coat. Before I could think, Clara moved. Everything happened in one breath, the flash, the sound, the smell of gunpowder. My ears rang, my heart slammed against my ribs. Peter stumbled backward, a look of shock on his face, his gun clattering to the floor. He fell to his knees, clutching his shoulder. The 2 men with him froze, staring at the revolver in Clara's shaking hands. "Get out," she said, her voice low but steady, "or the next one won't miss." They didn't argue. They dragged Peter out, leaving a trail of blood across the snow. When the sound of their car finally faded, Clara collapsed into the chair, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The gun slipped from her hands. "Evie," she whispered, trembling, "what have I done?" "You saved us," I said, kneeling beside her. "No," she murmured. "I finished what Papa started. Violence for silence." I took her face in my hands. "No, you ended it." The sirens came hours later, not because we called them, but because someone had seen the men leaving. The police found blood on the porch, tire tracks in the snow, and a bullet lodged in the doorframe. Peter Dalloway was arrested that afternoon at a private clinic 2 towns over. The charges came fast: smuggling, fraud, corruption, and when the newspaper printed the story, our father's name was there too, but so was the truth about what he'd done to protect us at the end. Mama's letters, the false ledgers, the quiet bargains made to keep us alive. It all came out, tangled and imperfect, but real. Weeks passed before the noise faded. Reporters stopped calling. The police stopped visiting. And slowly, life returned to the small rhythms of tea, firelight, and the creak of old wood in winter. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Clara and I sat by the window watching the snow melt into puddles. "It's over," I said quietly. She smiled faintly. "No, Evie, the past never really ends. But for once, it's not chasing us anymore." I reached for her hand. "Promise me you'll stay this time." She looked out at the pale light breaking through the clouds. "For the rest of whatever time I've got left." And she did. In the spring, the garden bloomed again: yellow tulips, pink azaleas, the same flowers Mama once planted when we were girls. Clara spent her mornings pruning them, humming that same old lullaby I'd first heard from the bench outside the bakery. The melody no longer haunted me. It felt like peace. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I still hear the faint echo of the storm that began it all, the knocks on the door, the secrets in the cellar, But they don't frighten me anymore. They remind me that truth, however long it hides, always finds its way home. And as for the ledger, it was never returned. The police claimed they never found the original, only copies in their archives. I know better. I buried it myself, under the old oak tree in the garden, where the roots run deep and the soil keeps its secrets. I like to think Mama would approve, because sometimes justice isn't about who answers for the past, it's about who chooses to stop carrying it. Clara and I did, together, and that, after half a century of silence, was enough.